Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the 817 podcast, where we talk everything about the great city of Fort Worth and Tarrant County. We hope you enjoyed your Easter weekend. EJ, we're recording early. Usually we do this on Sundays, but we're doing this on Friday. How's your week?
We're not thinking anything's going to come out over Easter weekend. So what we're just like, we're going to like use this pod to be more of kind of a lot of fun updates that like, it's not like massively important to the state of the city, but they're good topics to cover.
Yeah, it's a casual week on the 817.
If you're new to the show, or if this is just your second or third show because you were here from the debate, the 817 podcast, we do 3 short stories, 1 big story about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We're going to dive into that. Also, I just want to give an update. You know, Jimmy, the hunt of the next co-host of the 817 podcast. It's been fun trying to figure it out. Everyone
make it a
likes
reality TV show.
You know, like the Bachelorette.
Or I was thinking more like, American Idol or The Voice, other like voice type of things. But if you want to go on dates with everybody, you're welcome to.
Well, yeah, it could be like, every episode, and I'm like, man, I really like this person. I give somebody a rose at the end.
Yeah.
A bottle of TX whiskey. But no, it's been going great. And I've even got some emails. I got some resumes. Like, This is my resume. But what right now, Bill, for anyone who's like truly interested about being the co-host of the 817 podcast, again, you got to email me if we don't know each other. And obviously that will be like lower on, like, I'm going down a list of people. I have a short list of people. I'm seeing what we can do. But I also would love to know if you're interested, because we'd love to have extra guests and extra co-hosts. Like, it doesn't always have to be the same 2 people on all the time. So please share, and please tell me if you're interested. It's been fun and cool to look for this, because it's like a vulnerable thing. Like, hey, do you want to hang out with me every week? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, a thing. That's a commitment. If I ask my wife that, I'm not even sure she wants to do that. You know what I mean? But let's go ahead and dive into the podcast story. Short story number 1. It's just going to be all the tea. We're going to give you all the tea and all the gossip in Fort Worth right now.
There wasn't much news this week, but there was a lot of tea.
Yeah, a lot of tea. So the first one I want to talk about, which is a crazy story. This episode is going to feel like a small town murderer episode. Like, that's what the goal is today for the 817 podcast. This one is crazy. This is the Fort Worth City Council candidate ineligible to run according to a police report of shooting. Rachel Burnett. I've never gotten her name right. Sorry, Rachel. So what basically has happened here is Fort Worth Stop 6 neighborhood it's District 5, and candidate William McKinley Jackson is listed as living both in 2 addresses, one in Stop 6 and in the district, and one not in the area. And William is also a pastor at a local church in the area. He is the pastor at Sam Maria Baptist Church, located on East Berry. And what's crazy is that I guess like he has a 1,400 square foot home in the district, but then he kind of lives out in another home, and the home in the district is like valued at $117,000. The other one's like over $400,000. And what's crazy about this story is he somehow what's crazy about it, he's like a pastor in a city. It seems like he might be the person who gives Gina any type of sweat. Like, Willoughby's not going to do anything. So what's funny about it is just like, then he admits that him and his wife live in separate houses. And like, I guess like from a religious perspective as a pastor, that was he was saying, is like, my wife lives there. We live here.
It feels weird. Like his church is in District 5. He has a house in District 5. His wife's medical practice, I believe, is, out in unincorporated Tarrant County. And so they've got a house out there too. And so it's like, which house is actually your homestead? Which it also, Fort Worth Report did a follow-up story of like, who usually checks these things. Like, it usually doesn't come down to a police report about a house to find out. There's the whole Dr. Dixon thing in his election last year of where does he actually live? But yeah, so apparently at his Stop 6 house, there was a shooting recently where, nobody was in the house, but all of a sudden a bunch of bullet holes were fired in there. Now, so someone alleged that this was actually the Fort Worth PD that shot into here to try and drum up this whole like politically motivated thing of revealing that this is not his homestead.
It got shot up 50 times.
Yeah,
50 bullets.
yeah. Wait, like 50 bullets at an empty house, like it doesn't make sense. There is a little bit of a conspiracy aspect to that. Bob Willoughby in a Facebook post accused Gina Bivens of orchestrating the shooting to scare him out of the race. Bivens said, there are rumors circulating she was responsible. She says, "I'm a little old lady. I don't know people who can shoot up houses, and I don't have the authority to hire cops." Now, number one, that's not a denial. Did she say, "No, I didn't do this"? No, she didn't. Number two, you're a little old lady who is funded by the Fort Worth Police Officers Association. So you got to know some people to make a phone call. Now, I don't, when Bob Willoughby comes out saying something, you're kind of like, okay.
Gina Bivens' name doesn't start with a G for nothing. She's a real one. An OG. She OG.
I'm not buying the I'm a little old lady thing. Like, get out of here with that garbage. Like, you have been a politician for too long. Am I saying you did this? No. When Bob Willoughby comes calling, he's kind of the boy who cried wolf. And yes, the boy who cried wolf did get something right eventually. But is this the thing for him? I don't know. And
it just seems a little dramatic. Like, if you're just here to hit a police report, the 50 times is what kind of blows my mind. And yeah, I mean, because then it could even lead like, if someone was targeting you or something, it's like, what kind of pastor are you? Like what's going, like what's happening on the back end. So it's just a crazy story because one, it seemed like Gina was running with this regardless what happens, but maybe there was fear of this guy like doing some type of damage. I don't know though.
It feels pretty sus, but also
no way,
I don't know.
Right?
It's just
like no way.
I will also say though, Fort Worth Report describes that house as having overgrown grass, and let me tell you, the grass in that picture is not overgrown. Yeah, we need to hold people to looser lawn standards here. Yeah. Like, what are you, the neighborhood association?
The HOA out here? Fort Worth Report taking dues. All right, so anyways, that's just a crazy story. I thought that was an interesting story. If you didn't know about it, now you do. We will leave it there and let Fort Worth Weekly do the rest of the work. Let's go and dive into the other story. The pastor.
Yeah, Fort Worth was national this week in Bloomberg. This Texas preacher's $24 million Ponzi scheme. Doc Gallagher, from Bedford, Texas, just outside of Fort Worth, part of Tarrant County. I believe this was still in Tarrant County. Basically, he's a pastor who has been telling people that he will help you invest your money, and it turns out that he's not. To make a long story short, it's a pretty entertaining read on Bloomberg. And it's basically about a woman and her daughter who inherited some money and were trying to figure out what to do with it. They kind of had it in a couple different places. Eventually, their pastor, Mr. Gallagher, told him, like, hey, like, let's get this all in one place. Like, let's make it easy for you. And then, they had no idea what their money was invested in. After a little while, they started to think that was kind of weird. They couldn't see what their money was, how their money was growing, if it was gaining anything. And, Yeah, turns out it was all a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, that's another news, and that's just crazy stories that are happening in Fort Worth. Obviously, the last one that's happened in the Metroplex was Clarence Thomas, U.S. Supreme Court, has been treated to luxury vacations by Dallas real estate investor Harlan Crow, which that one a lot of people knows about. We'll see if anything gets done on that. At this rate, looking at the indictment of Trump, that doesn't seem like anything will come from it. But it's a crazy story.
It hits close to home with an unelected official taking rides on billionaires' planes.
I know, yeah, David Cook on the Clarence Thomas pathway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a crazy story. 20 years, you're talking like public servants who have salaries of $285,000 on the vacation. We're talking how much like the actual vacation costs is more than what Clarence makes. It's just a really
And the people that
integrated.
The people that he is on vacation with being people that he is then making Supreme Court decisions that it affects, where it like very clearly affects them.
Yeah, and it was just crazy because other Supreme Court and even like state court people or people in the justice system, they're just like, as a judge, you're like super conservative on like what donations you get, like who you hang out with. Like people talk about that being one of the most responsible like positions to be careful. And obviously,
well, and you're very clearly hiding it too,
Yeah.
and like you're supposed to disclose gifts. What do you call this if not a gift? If you called me up and said, "Hey, I bought you a plane ticket. We're going to wherever," that would be a present to me.
As many times Jimmy's been to Disney World, I have not been invited. This is a really true thing. But
I would have to disclose that gift in public.
But anyways, those are just funny short stories that we thought you guys should know. The links will be in the descriptions if you just want to read the whole stories. They're good. They're good. Almost sounds like fiction. So let's go ahead and dive into the second short story. This, we're going to talk about the water system in Fort Worth, the city. This is just a cool story from an environment. Actually, shout out to Haley Samsel, who's the environmental reporter at Fort Worth Report. I just think there's been a lot of good stories about environment. Like for a category of news that I imagine is not high click ratey, I feel like she's trying her best. So I just want you to see that. So for the first time since 2005, Fort Worth area cities will have the ability to buy water from a new source. No new reservoir required. The Tarrant Regional Water District can now divert and sell floodwater from Eagle Mountain Lake and Lake Benbrook to cities including Fort Worth, Arlington, and Mansfield across 11 North Texas counties. Eagle Mountain Lake sits in northwest Tarrant County, while Lake Benbrook is located on Fort Worth's southwest border. Late last year, the water district could only draw water from the reservoirs themselves once the lakes were full.
So basically, it seems like before we had to wait for the lakes to overflow and then have that water like trickle down into other lakes and reservoirs, and then it could get diverted to Fort Worth because, it wasn't in that lake anymore. But now, we have a lot of technology around monitoring water levels. Now we can actually divert that water instead of just having to wait for a lake to overflow, and be a little bit more ahead of the game.
And that's something that Fort Worth is really important on, is water in the Metroplex to across, to Dallas County. So it's just this is why the Tarrant Regional Water District and voting for this and looking at that election is important, because they actually have a lot of power. And it's also there's no guarantee the environment conditions each year will obviously collect the maximum amount. It was 91.6% full as of, a couple days. So, a lot of options and prosperity here. So it's just a short story. Thought it was a cool, just to update where you're getting your water. And Fort Worth has some really high quality aged. Let's go ahead and dive into our third story, which is around the innovation districts. You kind of seem like, when me and you were trying to decide what were going to be the short stories, we were kind of having struggle. And then I kind of said, what do you think about this innovation story in the Dallas Innovates pod in their article? So the Fort Worth City Council has created like these innovation districts, which the Medical Innovation District and the Alliance Texas Mobility Innovation Zone, but they're using policy to designate these areas and hopefully stimulate new businesses to come and steward and support the ecosystems of like the medical district and what's happening in Alliance. The story starts out with the Fort Worth City Council took a critical step in its effort to drive research, new product development, commercialization, and supporting activities in Tarrant County seat. The council recently approved a new policy that defines and guides the formal designations of innovation in the city. Along with the formalizing policies, the Fort Worth Medical Innovation District and the Fort Worth Mobility Zones in the Economic Development Strategic Plan from 2017, they said we should use these clusters and organize similar industries that define these areas. I'm really surprised they didn't do a defense community zone with like, or maybe that falls into Alliance, but it was like basically their list here is like, according to the city, the main three areas is to be aware of like, what does this mean? Organizations within those districts will tend to focus on a specific industry or set of connected industries, interrelated. So like, I know a lot of what Fort Worth does. Our TechStars program was very like medical focused, tech, public, health. A lot of Fort Worth, we're not like welcoming or like we're not really big on innovate in all places. And our strategy, because I feel because of our budget and because of our players, we really just focus on, hey, Fort Worth is one of those, let's just focus on what we do really well. And so they have like logistics, Alliance. We mentioned and talked about water earlier. So it's like we just focus on what we do really well, even if we have a lot of holes in other areas. So the second part was the district itself is focused on interconnectivity by being or becoming walkable and transit accessible. Jimmy. And offering supporting mixed-use housing, office, and retail to create a true live, work, play environment. So maybe that's why they didn't pick other zones because
it means we'd have to actually do something.
Yeah, that's like, let's already pick places that are developed.
That was my thing reading this article was like, this was suggested in 2017, which we know from the Race and Culture Task Force that Fort Worth doesn't do very well at implementing things that outside entities tell them to do. So at least now, I mean, it's been 6 years to tell us that, oh yeah, like we have a lot of medical things happening right here. You're going to be that district. Oh yeah, we have all the transit stuff happening. You're going to be that district. Like, I just don't necessarily see how it changes anything. And obviously, like, you have to start somewhere. But what's the next step of saying, I feel like a lot of our artistic culture has really become scattered, where it used to feel like you could go to the near South Side if you wanted to experience something like that. But now, like, it just feels like everything's a little bit more spread out. So what would it look like to be proactive in saying that, this part of the near South Side is going to become our arts district, it kind of butts up to the medical one, but like we could put it around the museums too, or, what about like we've got all the film stuff going on in the stockyards? Like, do we try and establish things in the stockyards around that?
But they don't want mixed use there.
Yeah, they don't want. We know they don't want mixed use there. So
doesn't hit the code on this one.
Yeah, it just feels kind of like, oh, we created these guidelines that like kind of apply to a couple places we already have. We're smacking that label on there. So if somebody is coming into the city or looking at the city saying, where do I find medical innovation? We know where to point them. Yeah. It just,
so let me make sure at the last bullet, which is, so the first bullet just really quickly was like they have interrelated industries and the organizations like are aligned. The district itself supports the mixed use and live, work, play. And the final thing is the district has defined and clear specific boundaries that include key anchor institutions like universities or research hospitals. So like for me, this part too is it kind of feels a little bit like, oh, Fort Worth play nice. Everybody's trying to win. So like, how do you make everybody happy? And what I mean there is like the big thing on innovation, it comes from serendipity, collaboration of different industries, right? Reason why like San Francisco or Austin, whatever you would consider an innovative place, it's, man, I'm ordering coffee. I'm an engineer who bumps into a lawyer who's talking to an artist. And those different perspectives on a topic then inspires, we should probably, does anyone know something in patent or trademarking? And now that the flow gets flowing, like it's kind of the opposite of innovation in a way, like that like pitting things in clusters rather than making more of a, how do you, like you said, the artists to go, like artists are not hanging out in alliance, but you know who would benefit from hanging out with some artists? All those people, right? Like that just will bring a lot of different creativity and modernness to their companies.
Yeah. So
the other big thing too is like for me, the like live, work, play. That's probably why I thought this was a short story. Is just like this idea of integrating. We're talking about innovation and housing together. Like that's just something that I feel like, I don't know if most cities do that, but it just sounds like we're talking about those at the same time. And that to me is cool for the city, but how that comes out, I don't know.
Yeah, especially because the two that we're suggesting, butt up to a lot of neighborhoods and not necessarily apartment complexes.
Well, there you have it. Those are our short stories. Let's dive into the big story. The big story is on April 6th, all candidates who are running for an election here, remember, we're voting starting April 24th is early election to May 2nd. May 6th is election day. April 6th, the campaign people, I guess the politicians who are running, had to put their budgets up for the city. And so we spent like a good 45 minutes just kind of jamming through them and like reading them and just seeing what we're noticing. This is a very important topic, right? It's because when it comes to elections and who to vote for, you can't always trust what people say to your face. You have to see what money they're taking and money moves with a mission. And so it's important that it gets confusing, especially in nonpartisan races where you don't have to say I'm a Democrat. You don't have to say I'm a Republican. And you're trying to navigate that. So we're going to spend the big story time discussing things that we thought were interesting and fascinating, especially because a lot of seats were like not really competitive. So Jimmy, I'm going to let you go take it from here.
Yeah, first we can start out with mayor and so from all the ones that we've looked at across all the districts, there are two people that have hit six figures on campaign donations. One of them probably very clear because you have seen her on every single any website you click on, you probably have like a Google ad for Mayor Maddie Parker. And I mean, she has more fundraised than like pretty close to everybody else combined. But she's brought in $223,000, which is just crazy when
that's close to what she brought for the real election.
Oh, I think she was in a million.
She hit a million?
She might have hit a million, but she was definitely over $500,000.
Yeah. Okay.
But still, like, one of the other candidates for mayor put up zero. Like, what do you need $223,000 for? I mean, and it's a lot of the normal suspects as far as institutions, as far as the, Fort Worth elite, as far as some of the, PACs that you would expect, Police Officers Association, all of that. But I thought it was just very crazy that in a non-competitive election, she still brought in $223,000. And maybe that's just a warning shot to anybody else who in the future wants to come run against her, that
I like that analysis.
Without even having to really try. We've got 223 fundraised. Let's see if you can get close without any of the institutional investors, because I've got them all on my team already.
Yep. And it's just going to be hard it's going to be hard to run against Maddie for anyone. I mean, I mean, if I think about it, it's like, who?
Another one in six figures. I hadn't looked at his before because he's running unopposed, but Michael Crane, 125K. And again, a lot, in uncontested races, like that's pretty crazy. But a lot of it is, the Moncriefs, the Berries, some lawyers' offices, some PACs, that sort of suspect. And I assume that you just get to kind of bank that until your next campaign. So it's definitely a leg up for next time. Some of them hadn't gotten them in yet, which I found a little bit surprising. But I think one thing that stuck out to me is these like maybe more non-establishment people in races like 6 or like 11. Jared Williams, Italia De La Cruz could be a closer race. Jared had a close race last time. You would think being more established this time.
Isn't she kind of?
Oh yeah, she's a loony.
Yeah.
But he's at 23,000, and she's at 10. Chris Nettles, I was surprised because he's also running unopposed. But again, I think part of it is building up a bank for next time, in case you do have somebody running against you. I was kind of surprised he has a few more of those like establishment type of donors than I was maybe expecting. Firefighters Association, a couple of the same lawyers' offices that donated to Mayor Parker. And then, Elizabeth Beck was one that stuck out to me as well in a race that seems like it won't be insanely competitive, but she was in the like 70K range. And for her, the vast majority of that's coming from individuals, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned off like when we were just looking through things that you just kind of said it, and it grabbed my attention. Like, if someone tried to ran against Maddie, like, could that be the person who has the best shot?
Yeah, like whenever somebody does try to do it, like, who are we looking at? Like, maybe Jared Williams, maybe Elizabeth Beck. Like, they're the ones that have shown they can, really put together a campaign and rally people. But then again, who knows how long it'll be until that happens.
And it might be like, Maddie's getting that Kate Granger seat, once or something like that. Like, once that transition happens, right, then it's open. Like, because then, what's funny? Ooh, okay. Now we're really just, hanging out. It's like, could you see a playbook where Maddie takes Kate Granger's seat, Crane versus Beck? Kind of, that seems like a...
I thought you were going to say Maddie's chief of staff versus whoever to like follow the line of like Betsy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, is that the expectation? Yeah, I get what you're saying there. You know who I saw in the coffee shop the other day?
Who?
I don't know if he recognized, like, we definitely looked at each other. Dr. Brian Bird. I saw him in the coffee shop, and we just made eye contact. He was in a meeting talking, and we just head nodded. I was like, I'm getting this latte and getting the heck out of here. Take it to go. But I haven't seen that guy since we did our first run around with Mayor.
So the person who is over 6 figures in fundraising, that you might not expect. We talked about District 7 a lot last week, and that's Macy Hill. And man, it's mind-boggling to look through these numbers and just see when the Fort Worth elites like choose you as their candidate.
Clear.
Like, it's so clear, and money just like pours in.
Yeah, it's clear that, and it's oftentimes I feel like it's clear when they're more afraid of someone else running. And because what's crazy, because here's why I say that. District 4, one of the candidates doesn't have the reporting. The other one did 15, 19,000. District 4 is truly the G League, and someone's going to get to play in the NBA.
Yeah,
It's mind blowing how, like, man, that is like a crazy. If you might just be some like famous person who lives in District 4, got a TikTok or something. Just
who's the grandpa from Fort Worth that's pretty big on TikTok? Maybe he needs to get a house in District 4 and he could take over.
Yeah, just run. So I find so the establishment piece is big. And it's like, because where is that in 4, but it's clearly in 7. Like, it's just a weird, like, why did you not choose? You chose Maddie, you chose Jeanette, you're choosing people, but then, like, man.
Well, and that's the other weird piece, is where does the money not go? And the answer is to Jeanette. You know, Jeanette Martinez does have the most raised out of District 11 with $24,500. But yeah, like, that's pennies compared to the numbers that we've just thrown around.
Yeah, Macy Hill 4X.
But you look at, and in the most competitive seat, but you look at Jeanette's donors, and it's all the same people. It's all the same PACs. It's the Committee for Public Safety, For the Children PAC, Good Government Fund,
which are, there's a lot to unpack here. I don't know how we want to talk about it, but I think a part of this financing stuff here is this is, to me, why it's so important to check the financing of the people you're going to choose to vote for. Like, go to their website, check their issues, but then check who's backing them. Because, right, like, Jeanette has the Act Blue, like, and is a Democrat. I'm not saying she's not a Democrat, but she has all the same donors as a Maddie Parker, and it's like that. You don't see that, right? The Murphy Nasica thing is true, right? She uses the same consulting firm as Maddie Parker, as Governor Abbott. At this rate, so it's like, that's like, to me, like, if you're someone who's like trying to decide, like, if you're a progressive, like, you're a super, like, anti-cop or whatever, whatever your thing is like, I don't know. I feel like the donations in District 11, they tell a couple stories. Number one, where no power is behind any of these people. $25,000 not a lot of money. Number two, it also reinforces that nobody cares about our neighborhoods or what we have to say on the east side of 35.
Yeah, when you hear 4 or 5 candidates show up at these panels and say, they lump together all the neighborhoods that nobody has cared about forever, like, you see that in the campaign finance reports.
Yeah. My next number 3 is like, my 3 is just around who's a Republican, who's a Democrat. And is this like going to be the era of the District 11 where I've seen all 3 panels, and even Rick Herring's like, I'm proud that I can see my sign in a place that used to have Trump and a place that used to have Beto. Like, and he talked about how he's like a man of the people. But Jeanette's kind of trying to play in that game too. It's like, you can tell she starts out as like, probably has a Democratic views. She supports Roy Brooks, but now she's getting the Moncrief. She's getting the Fort Worth police. Heck, it's not, how far is it away until she gets Maddie Parker? Probably not that far. Then it's truly Jeanette and Rick Herring if that happens. But then then what clearly is happening is, it's just a very moderate options. It's the Fort Worth way options, right? And so it's, that's what's kind of going to be interesting about like how this financing plays out, plus all these endorsements play out. Rick's was pretty low.
Rick's was solid, and all individual donors. Same with Tara Wilson.
Tara's
one
was,
who stuck out to Tara was Deborah Peoples has donated to Tara Wilson. Who knows if that turns into some sort of endorsement eventually. But yeah, I mean, we are, I would say, the District 11, I would say, does contain a lot of the more progressive districts. When it comes to statewide election time, these neighborhoods are just littered with Beto signs.
The part to me that's challenging, and I know I'm sorry for everyone who's not District 11, and look, we're not biased to us and our district. It just truly is the most competitive. I mean, just look at the finances. Macy Hill blowing everyone else out the water, right? It's Elizabeth Webb blowing everyone else out the water. Tara, Rick, Jeanette. I haven't looked at Ricardo's, but those three are between $10,000 and $25,000. Mm-hmm. So it's a toss up from like who's behind them from a wealth perspective, and so it is the debate to talk about. And when we were first starting this pod, the thing we talked about was the mayoral race, and I love some people see us as like, you look at our Apple podcast reviews and it's like, oh, they're NBC narrative or whatever. But we went out and endorsed like the Ann Zeta for mayor, which I would like to say is like, we are very conscious on our values that it's not like about parties or the Tarrant Democratic Party or the Tarrant Republicans. But to me, if District 11, which I have seen a ton of Beto signs, and if we're talking about if you're going to copy and paste, if you're someone who had a Beto sign in your yard, and you're going to copy and paste that narrative, you're not voting for Rick or Jeanette. That means you're having to vote for one of the underdogs, Tara Wilson or Ricardo Avitia or Christopher Johnson if he's serious, right? Like that's to me what's so crazy about this is that Jeanette has the establishment. She's positioned as a moderate Democrat, but she's super copy. I mean, she has a lot of copy. She's up to like 5. Her mom's carburetor got taken, shotgun in her window through her car. Her kid got beat up. Someone was following her. Like, it's all 3 panels. So then, like, for me, it's like, how is there could there be an upset because of the Meadowbrookies, and like you mentioned, that was a good take, have like they stay with their Beto values and they clearly are going to pick someone that's not those two? Or is it like this is one where the average age of the voting population 64 and it's just Jeanette and Rick?
Yeah. And maybe some of these bigger donors that we're seeing in the other races are waiting for a potential runoff to really just like go all in on supporting Jeanette. But we're also like a pretty anti-establishment area, and having that establishment, I think, works against her. And now she's kind of like splitting votes with Rick instead of splitting votes with Tara. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all like, who knows how it's going to play out. We'll see in the next month. But I think for me, the biggest takeaway from looking at the campaign finance reports was just how much money is going into this election for a lot of seats that are not competitive at all. Like, we talked a lot last election about how much money was flowing into that race because it was very apparent. But right now we're seeing a lot of unspent money, which means that, some of these incumbents are getting to really build up an arsenal for whenever a serious competitor does come. And that's why it is so tough to unseat an incumbent on any level of race. But I think we're kind of seeing it play out here. We're seeing the, establishment kind of gathering their arms.
When Rick said this is a bunch of neighborhoods that people don't care about, it just shows you how the funding was being positioned, and it keeps going to races that aren't running, but yet there are competitive races. District 4, we're talking like $5,000 between both of them.
Yeah.
And he got ours where the highest person's $25,000. these are the most competitive races. But it just shows when we say, man, y'all sure do invest in the stockyards a lot. Man, y'all sure do invest in the Montgomery Plaza and Crockett Row a lot. This is the behavior of how we develop everything in Fort Worth. We're all in on the places we know how to culturally run, but we have no interest in investing and diversifying our investments, not just in politicians, in development, in businesses, in entrepreneurs who are not from District 7.
9.
Nine. So it's like, because Alan only has a couple $1,000 too, so it's not even 10. So anyways, it's just very interesting. Like, I think it's not just investing into politicians. This is how we invest into development. This is how we invest in everything else. And it's just a copy, print, paste of why Fort Worth is so distorted.
I think that's a good bow to put on it.
Man, you know what? We were worried we did not have an episode today. And if you're still with us, man, we are doing a great episode for you guys. At least we got through the water story. You know, once we got through that water story, we're good.
Just smooth sailing.
Yeah. Wow. No pun intended. Look at that. Water sailing. Look at you crushing it. You're a natural. All right. So let's go ahead and hit wins and losses. I'm going to start with my loss. Ted Cruz was in town at the Fort Worth Club. And I just think this is showing, like, we all got to remember, like, the narrative here of Fort Worth is the last metro in Texas that has GOP tight hold, right? We're the largest city in the country with a Republican mayor. Maybe Jacksonville has beat us out again, or it's always between us two. And, you know, you can't sell tourism dollars to be a Republican, but you can as Cowboys. Anyways, what I'm saying is that this is a loss because our chamber, who represents small businesses of all people, is just showing the power of hiring a Governor Abbott candidate, who is now Governor Abbott has been in town and Ted Cruz has been in town, all in less than a month. So my loss is just like, how do you navigate business while also sleeping with, like, the conservative GOP narrative? And, like, when you look at young entrepreneurs who you're looking to uplift and inspire, like, it's just a loss that because a lot of them don't probably look like the people who were in that room that day. So, like, it's just, this is why I'm not a part of the chamber, you know, and I was one of your 13 fastest growing private companies last year. So it's like, an L is you still don't get at the Chamber of Commerce. That's all.
Yeah, this is what you get when you hire Greg Abbott's deputy chief of staff. My loss, so I don't know, you know, I didn't have like a real loss. This one's kind of stretching, but Deco 969, the new skyscraper going up in downtown, finished off the top, like it got to the top. It's not going any higher. And my loss is that it's a boring looking building. Like, this is the first time that we have broken that plane of like 13 or 15 stories in a while. And I know that we're only building what banks will fund people to build, but we could have some like slightly interesting architecture going on. But it's just really boring.
Especially after it's the first building in 30 years we upgrade on our skyline.
Yeah, and I was just like, man, like this is plain. Like, just add some level of dynamic architecture to it. It doesn't have to be a ton. It probably doesn't have to be expensive, but just plain old, straight up, boring glass building.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Now, you want to do your win? Because yours is kind of...
Yeah, my win is that the near South Side skate park is finally open. Fire Station Park celebrated its grand opening, or will celebrate its grand opening on Saturday, April 29th. I've seen videos of people skating there already. Really cool. I love that we're adding something like this as a public amenity into a really dynamic area and neighborhood. It was built on budget of approximately $1.6 million and is really, you know, something unlike anything we have in Fort Worth right now. It's been 7 years in the making, which is crazy for building a skate park. But I love that it is opening just in time for the summer. And I hope it's a gathering and communal place for a lot of people in the city now that we have it.
Yeah, no, awesome stuff.
It goes along
were
with.
you ever a skate? Go ahead.
Well, it goes along with all of the new bike trails that are opening too. All of the mountain biking trails that are opening over in.
That was going to be my win, but then I didn't choose it. But so that's good you added to it. So yeah, 4 miles of bike. It's open, and I think it just opened. Or
yeah,
so 4 miles of like
over
biking.
like right next to Como.
Yeah, so super cool there. And did you ever have a skateboard phase? Were you ever skateboard? Okay.
Not at all.
I was.
I could not balance on one of those things.
Yeah, I grew up, Tony Hawk, PlayStation, that game was fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I played Tony Hawk.
But I was like Jinko jeans and like I had grinding shoes where you can jump up and grind. I was like, I had a moment, like had a moment in a skateboard. I thought I was doing it. So my win is this super, I want more about this. But a Fort Worth report article around how there's going to be an exhibit with a partnership with BNSF around discriminatory practices at an upcoming exhibit. It says, for those living along Fort Worth East Lancaster Avenue in the 1940s, chances of getting a bank loan to purchase a home would have been near impossible for many Black Americans. I would argue it still is. But that's because lending institutions use government-designed maps that rank the loan's worthiness of neighborhoods. So the whole practice of redline was just kind of like, it's clear in our history. The dates for it is it's titled "The Practice of Democracy: Advancing Fair and Affordable Housing in Fort Worth." The exhibit will run June 2nd to July 29th at BNSF Gallery of Fort Worth Community Arts Center. I think it's a great conversation. This is something that I just think it's really important for people who care about, abolishing poverty or any of those kind of topics in the city. And the fact that BNSF is doing this, I actually think I might know who is leading this. And if it is her, she's a rock star. But I just think that's a win to have private, public partnerships, but then like even BNSF like being a part of this and funding it.
Yeah.
Cool, guys.
Well, thank you for tuning in this week. I know it was a little bit of a humble jumbled episode, but we started out with a new water source and we ended with campaign finance reports.
Yeah, the thirst trap. Who was
the literal thirst trap? Yeah.
All right, beautiful people, be good. See you next week. Have a happy Easter, and until next time.